Three, two, 1, 0. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new stream. Don't mind this pimple patch on my forehead. But today's video, we are going to be watching a bioelectricity as cognitive clue from diverse intelligence to regenerative medicine. So, this is going to be a theory of science of consciousness and truly what we come from. What are we and how do we work truly? Um, so come with me to watch this video. We are going to start it and do 30-minute increments. And let's just jump right into it. Let's go.
This live stream, we are going to take a look at the amazing, groundbreaking work of Dr. Michael Levin. I've covered him a little bit on this channel before. We watched one of his presentations. It was a different one, obviously. And of course, his work is it's revolutionary on so many levels, and the implications of a lot of it are so multifaceted in terms of their impact on different areas of our thinking. There are psychological components, there are biological components, and there are implications in regards to consciousness and evolution, and even metaphysical and philosophical stuff. One of the things that really interests me about it is this idea of a universal mind that goes back to forever, basically. You know, there's been some variant of this one mind concept that has emerged in all kinds of different cultures around the world forever and ever. And so I've always kind of been of the opinion that spirituality and science don't need to be mutually exclusive, and there actually shouldn't be any conflict, that they should be complementary. The one should kind of inform the other. And this these revelations of Michael Levin basically confirm some sort of field of intelligence. One of the most interesting things that he's done that I'm aware of.
So Michael Levin, he is a scientist, and he's the person on the right, so the one with the red shirt. And basically, he's going to throw out this theory and basically try to prove how everything is one, everything comes from one source, right? So, however you want to explain this higher being, this source, this God, this energy, Michael Levin, in a little bit, is going to explain what that is and how it works and how it applies to our everyday lives.
On a couple of levels again, because it could lead to, likely will lead to, I think you could probably say, and it hasn't happened yet, but it seems certain that this research will lead to us having the medical ability to regenerate limbs on humans, to restore eyesight. And he literally has said that this could be the cure for everything.
So yeah, this is groundbreaking studies, especially within the science field, because science has not really recognized mysticism or magic in their practices because it's all very scientific based. And Michael Levin is kind of breaking that barrier and trying to prove to everyone that this is what we come from, and it can help us in many ways, just as he said, with like medicine and treating cancer, treating anything, right? Because I truly believe that anything can be cured. Um, but let's keep watching.
Basically a bioelectric way of manipulating our biology in order to rid ourselves of diseases. Um, and that, by the way, is something that could help to liberate us from the power structure that we're currently struggling against. Because Big Pharma, I'm sure they'll find a way to
So It's both like a good and bad perspective, depending on which perspective your life is kind of in line with. For example, this seems good, right? And it is good. The fact that this research can progress into something so powerful that none of us will be able to have any diseases, right? But for example, um, like big corporations, that's kind of their ultimate goal is to kind of get everyone sick. So if no one can get sick, then there's no goal for those big corporations, and those big corporations will pretty much crumble.
That sort of shift the balance of power, at least into new hands. So I'm a little bit worried about Dr. Levin because he poses quite a threat to an awful lot of powerful people, I think. And what I was saying about the morphogenetic revolution that he's presenting is basically that he has proven that the genome is not the DNA is not the only steward of the evolutionary process. That it's true in certain circumstances that impulses from this electromagnetic field can cause changes in organisms and in their progeny without changing the genome. So this idea of morphic resonance that I think was first proposed by Rupert Sheldrake and was long considered sort of debunked. If you really look into it, it's not that it was debunked, it's just that it was never really accepted by mainstream science. But Levin has basically found ways to confirm that it is actually a reality. And so
Yeah, which is awesome because, again, like he said, the mainstream science haven't really acknowledged the other side of science, which can be transformative. So Michael Levin is really breaking those boundaries.
this idea of collective intelligence, I think before we get started, the last point I want to make is that it is important on a metaphysical or spiritual level because it kind of validates and helps us to understand the effect that the transcendental experience has on give us a sort of mechanistic understanding and sort of help to validate this kind of thinking, which I think is tremendously important. If it's true that gnosis and transcendental experiences of all types elevate our human consciousness and make us more kind and empathetic and help us to get over traumas and not to fear death and all of this sort of thing, then any bridge that we can build towards adaptation in the mainstream of this kind of expanded thinking is tremendously important. And so when there's a landmark development like this, it creates that bridge that people may give us a little bit more credibility when we're talking about, fields of consciousness and collective intelligence and whatnot. One other thing, if it's true that the all is mind, that consciousness has some sort of fundamental functional process in the creation of the universe, the Jungian idea of archetypes fits very well into this idea of this electromagnetic field and morphic resonance, in the sense that there are sort of imprints that are made in this field that contain information but no energy. And so it very much mirrors that process that Jung put forward. And if I understand correctly, it was actually that got Sheldrake thinking about his theory, and I'm sure that had some influence on Levin. So tons of reasons to be interested in this stuff, as we will see. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Let me check in with the chat just real quick and make sure I'm not having any audio issues or anything like that. Okay, I don't see any complaints in the chat, so let's go ahead and jump into this.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. Let's see. Hopefully you can see my slides. So if anyone's interested in finding the primary papers, the data, the software, everything is at this site here. So what I'm going to try to transmit is a few main points. First, our approach at the intersection of several disciplines that drives specific new discovery. So it's a way of thinking about agency, about memory and things like that in a way that actually drives new capabilities. I'm going to talk about this notion of navigating arbitrary problem spaces and the idea of that being an invariant that helps us to recognize, build, and communicate with some very unconventional agents in different embodiments. I'm going to use, for the primary example of this, I'm going to use the collective intelligence of cells navigating anatomical morphospace. And I'm going to talk about how electrical networks in particular are a kind of protocognitive medium which allows this collective to have problem-solving capacities in anatomical space. And this has many applications on biomedicine and also bioengineering. And at the end, I'll talk about some synthetic living beings that we created as a way to understand to at least begin to understand where novel goals for these agents can come from. So the first part of the talk will be to set a kind of philosophical foundation and to go over some examples.
Wait a minute. I'm pretty sure I just heard him say synthetic living organisms that we created. That's wild.
Examples that help us stretch our thinking about some of these topics. So this is a well-known painting. It's Adam naming the animals in the Garden of Eden. And the thing about the worldview that supports this kind of picture is that all the animals here are quite discrete. So it's very obvious which one is Adam. It's very obvious that there's a discrete set of other beings with different properties. And interestingly enough, and we'll get back to this at the end of the talk, according to this tradition, it was up to Adam to name the animals, actually, not God, not the angels. It was actually Adam that had to assign them names. Or another way to say it is to really understand their true nature. And I think that part's right on the money. We're gonna talk about that. Okay, so in this worldview, there are some discrete natural kinds here, but actually we've discovered then since Darwin showed us that actually this form here that most thinking, let's say in philosophy and so on, says the human and the human mind and so on, is actually a single point on a very rich continuum going all the way back to single cells. And developmental biology shows us that actually this is true even on a single the scale of a single animal. We all arise from one cell, and so there's this continuum. We're at the center of a very rich, smooth continuum of other forms, and some of which may have to different degrees the kind of human level agency, intelligence, and other properties that we typically think of as the modern human having. But it's actually even more interesting than that, because now with both biotechnology and all kinds of engineering, we now see that there's a whole other axis here where we can now start to make both biological and technological hybrids, chimeras, and various alterations, again, providing a whole new axis to this continuum where it becomes really hard to say at what point do you lose or gain certain properties that we used to think it was quite obvious with what humans had and animals didn't. And that's because at every level of organization, we can now mix in new materials, new information, new policies, and so on, and create all kinds of novel beings. So it becomes increasingly important to develop a framework, and this is one of the things that I work on, is to develop a framework that will allow us to simultaneously think about all sorts of unconventional agents. So beyond primates, birds, maybe an octopus or a whale, but also weird colonial organisms, swarms, synthetic new life forms that are engineered, artificial intelligences, either purely software or hardware robotics, and possibly someday even exobiological alien agents. And so the idea is that we need a framework that allows us to think about all of this. And I'm, of course, not the first person to suggest this. So here's Rosenbluth, Wiener, and Bigelow with a kind of cybernetic scale going all the way from passive matter all the way up to sort of human level metacognition up here. So they were trying to show how there really is a continuum of all these capacities. And what's important about this framework is that it has to move experimental work forward towards new capabilities. It can't just be philosophy. So in my framework, there's this notion of a continuum of persuadability, meaning focusing from an engineering perspective on what are the tools and approaches that one takes to modify what a system does. And you can imagine that along this continuum, and this is just 4 waypoints, there are many very simple systems which you can only modify by hardware rewiring. And then there are some cybernetic systems where you can change the set point and it will do something different. And you really don't have to know everything about how it works. You just have to know how to rewrite that set point. And then you've got these other beings that have this marvelous interface that allows us to alter their set points without actually digging in and physically changing them at all, meaning by experiences and stimuli. And this is why humans could train dogs and horses for thousands of years before we knew any neuroscience whatsoever, because they offer up this amazing interface that allows us to do that without this kind of rewiring. And then, of course, you even more complex systems where you can communicate with reasons and arguments. And so the key is that when you're faced with a novel system, you really can't make assumptions about where it's going to be. Many people do. They have philosophical pre-commitments to where, let's say, cells and tissues would fit on here. Modern molecular medicine says, well, they've got to be somewhere up here. We think it's an empirical question that actually needs to be answered by experiment. And so this is what we do. So let's think about where it is that we actually come from. We originate as a single unfertilized oocyte, this little quiescent cell, and that.
So where do we come from? What is our essence? And that is it. So listen carefully.
That is the sort of thing about which people say, "Oh, that's just physics," and I kind of really dislike that term, but it really is a piece of chemistry. And eventually, through this incredibly remarkable process of development, we end up being one of these things, or even something like this, a human that's going to make statements about not being a machine and so on. And what's important is that the process is smooth and continuous. There is no place here that developmental biology offers where you can draw a sharp line and say, everything up till now was chemistry and physics, and then from here on you have mind. That actually there is no spot like that. So we have to go from systems that are pretty well described by basic chemistry and physics to ones that are routinely dealt with by psychological and other kinds of techniques. So we have this one complex issue that we're sort of the product of this slow, gradual development, but at least we're a unified intelligence, right? I mean, we all feel like a centralized single being, and we think that when people say ant colonies and beehives are collective intelligences, well, maybe they're a kind of intelligence, but they're not like us. They're a distributed kind of thing. It's not real like us. But in fact, if we were to so for example, Descartes really liked the pineal gland because there's only one of them in the brain, and he felt that was really the seat of human consciousness, because the unified feeling that we have really has to have only one structural representation. But if he had had access to good microscopy, he would have looked inside the pineal gland and he would have seen that, wow, there's not one of anything. It's made of thousands upon thousands of cells. Each one of those cells has all of this stuff inside, right? So there really isn't one of anything. And so the fact is that we are all collective intelligences. We are all built of parts. And the research program that is suggested.
So he just said that the pineal gland basically is just another part of us. You hear a lot in New Age spirituality that you can access like DMT in your pineal gland, and honestly, I've fallen victim to that too. It's interesting to think, that we have like this third eye in our back brains, and not to say that it's not connected to our third eye or anything, but it's not just the pineal glands. I think what he's trying to get at and what I'm trying to get at. It's a collective consciousness, right? So It's not just the pineal gland.
By this is to understand how those parts scale up to a larger emergent individual.
Okay, so a couple of things. That is a cell with no brain, no nervous system, high competency. So that in and of itself kind of challenges the idea that brain, in some sense, neurons at least, are required for consciousness. We have other things that dispute that, refute that very thoroughly at this point. One of those things is that gas can be used, the same anesthetic gas, I guess nitrous oxide, that puts humans under, can be used to stop electrical activity in a plant, which basically implies that you have knocked it unconscious, right? So that's crazy. You can knock a plant out. Researchers have recently confirmed that plants know if they're being eaten, and Venus flytraps can count.
Yeah, so guys, plants know when they're being eaten. This is wild to think about. This is why I say thanks to my food every time I eat it, because I know they're watching me.
And not just one number set. They can track two, because what has to happen when they eat a bug is that two, or is it three? I think three hairs have to be tripped for it to close, and then two more to release the digestive juices once it's closed. So, we have plants that can count, and then Mimosa pudica, which is a very common plant that I use a lot in my medicines here. It's the touch me not. You touch it and it closes up. If you touch it and don't harm it over the course of just a few days, that particular plant will stop closing up, because it's like, oh, it's just that guy touching me again. It's not a threat, and it'll remember. So what is doing the remembering? We have no neurons in the plant. There is also the single cell slime mold in Japan that did a better job at engineering the subway system than human engineers with computers. And again,
That's what I'm saying. Like, especially with AI emerging, the fact that that is already happening already signals us that AI can do this. AI can be better, can design better than us because it's just so much smarter, right? It's so much smarter. And it's like, as well as, all of us are individual, but also connected with this source, with this energy, it's the same thing with AI. Like, even though there's different, like, GPTs and, like, different sources, systems, stuff like that, it's still all connected. I mean, it's still all AI. So the fact that AI has information, I don't know if AI is, like, conscious yet. Some people say it's already conscious. I can't really stand on anything like that right now, but the fact that this is already happening just proves like where are we going? Right? Like are jobs even gonna exist anymore? Who knows?
no brain, no neurons, no nothing. Like how, it doesn't have eyes. What is it? What is it doing? Um, and then there's something else too. Oh, and humans actually have been born with little to no brain that exhibit high level of intelligence. In fact, this condition, I don't remember what it's called, but the most extreme case of which I am aware, there was a doctor who was having headaches, and he went to get a brain scan because they were persistent, and they're like, you don't have a brain, like, at all. His spinal cord just ended in a sack of fluid, and he's a doctor. So that case compelled a researcher who died in 1992. So this must have been in the 80s, I guess. I don't know why I remember when the researcher died and not when the experiment happened. But eventually he, he rounded up a bunch of these people and determined that about 20% of them had above average IQs. And there was one gentleman that had 5% of his brain, and he was a mathematical genius. And
That's insane. A mathematical genius only was using 5% of their brain. I'm no mathematical genius. I think I'm using like 2%. No, but did you guys know that some people don't think? If you're one of those people, please put it down in the comments. Like some people literally do not think. I'm jealous.
completely normal in every other regard. So, really, what's interesting about this is that we have had, it only takes one case, right? Obviously, the brain has a function. If you get a spear stuck through your forehead, you're going to have brain damage more than likely. But, there's one exception that's it overthrows the understanding that the brain is necessary for cognition and for consciousness. Um, so just wanted to put all that out there that, I'm sure he's not going to mention any of that, but it seems very relevant.
So this is the kind of thing we're made of. We're made of an agential material, not passive matter, not even active matter, but matter with agendas. And so this is a single cell. You can see, well, there's no brain, there's no nervous system, and yet it handles all of its physiological, anatomical, metabolic, and other needs at the scale of this single cell. Quite competent. And in fact, the reality that our biology uses this architecture means that we can even have really fascinating cases like this. So this is a caterpillar. It's a soft-bodied kind of creature, so it has a particular controller made for a body with no hard elements. So there's nothing you can push on. Everything is sort of pneumatically operated, so to speak. And it has a brain suitable for driving that kind of body in a two-dimensional world of leaves. But it has to turn into this. It's a hard-bodied creature now that has to live in a three-dimensional world and drink nectar. No, it doesn't care about leaves. And so in order to change from here to there, all of the cells are rearranging. Most of the brain is dissolved. The connections are broken. Most of the cells are, in fact, killed off. And you build a new brain. But the remarkable thing is that the moth or caterpillar or butterfly still shows recall of memories that are formed in the caterpillar. So you can train the caterpillar and get memories recall out the other end. And so it's.
Did you hear what he just said? It forms a new brain. I mean, the whole internal of the chrysalis turns to glop, reconfigures itself, and even though it has developed a new brain, it can still retain memories from its previous life as a caterpillar. So,
Wait, that's insane, like honestly. And like the way he just said that, it kind of makes me think like that could be like a point for reincarnation, but who knows really?
that's just next level crazy. And some of the implications, that he doesn't really directly mention, and for good reason, you know, one of the things that prompted his research is the fact that the idea that blind random mutations are solely responsible for the reconfiguration of the glop that the butterfly becomes inside of the chrysalis. It really just doesn't do it. It doesn't explain everything. And I did a bunch of research looking into this to find out, am I just uneducated? Or are these valid questions that I'm asking? For example, if it takes this complex system to maintain a life form like ours, what happened during the time between developing necessary components of it? Why didn't we die? Is it just luck that we evolved a mouth and a way to emit the, it's just so complex. And the blind random mutations does not really do it, And so in looking into this, I discovered that a lot of the best intellectuals out there actually did acknowledge these things. And one of them, Noam Chomsky, I think, and I'm not interested in his politics, but I don't think there's any disputing that he's highly intelligent. He said something like, people say that we actually don't understand anything about biology and evolution in reality. And he said something like,
That's so true. Like it's always like irked me like where did we come from? How did we evolve to ourselves right now? And where are we going to evolve? Like how are we going to evolve? It's very interesting to say the least. And hopefully this video, this explanation gives us a little bit more of a deeper understanding of where we come from.
Like, we don't even know what the questions are. And that, so I was really surprised to start looking into this and find out that, there are these gaping holes and questions that no one can answer. And yet the scientific community tends to just put on blinders and sort of avert their eyes and go around them. Selective perception, speaking of collective intelligence, I think that actually collective intelligence can explain how that happens, because we have this group mind, we have this herd mentality, this group think. So something like selective perception can be collective. That's why we can have entire cultures that miss out on, evolutionary signposts, at least cultural evolutionary signposts or markers, some cultures may become very sophisticated, but they have very barbaric tendencies because there's some gaping hole in their collective perception. So, yeah.
We're starting to see that not only can we have change on the sort of evolutionary scale, but even within the lifetime of an individual, radical changes to the body structure, while some memories remain. And so this gives rise to all kinds of interesting philosophical questions. What's it like, again, never mind what's it like to be a butterfly, what's it like to be a caterpillar changing into a butterfly, right? It makes the changes of human puberty seem just absolutely minor compared to this. And the ability to store information in this robust medium that remains after the medium is refactored. This is taken to its complete conclusion, but in these animals, these are planaria, they have a true brain, and you can train them to expect food in this particular location with these little bumpy circles. And then you cut off their head and the tail sits there for about a week, doesn't do anything. It grows back a new brain. And when the new brain has grown back, you find out that they now spend their time looking for food at the correct location. It's called place conditioning. And the rest of the body seems to store in some way that information and imprint it onto the new brain. And in fact, you can cut them into many pieces and then ask thorny philosophical questions about which one is the original creature, or maybe all of them. And so this amazing feedback between the plasticity of the body and the cognitive content is fundamentally because we are built on a multi-scale competency architecture. Every layer, going all the way back through the body and the various organs and the tissues and the subcellular components and so on, it is not just structural. It's actually it's functional. It solves problems in various spaces. So there's a competency at all levels, and we humans are okay at recognizing intelligence, problem solving in kind of medium-sized objects moving at medium speeds in three-dimensional space. That's our familiar, all our sense organs point outwards that way. But if our sense organs, imagine if we had a direct sense of our blood chemistry, and we had some sort of a sensor inside that was able to give, 20 different measurements of our blood physiology. I think we'd have no problem having a direct perception of living in a 23-dimensional world where our liver and our kidneys were intelligent agents that navigate that physiological space on a daily basis. And so we deal with biological competencies in transcriptional space, so that is the space of possible gene expressions, anatomical morphospace, which is what we'll spend most of today talking about, and the space of physiological states. All of these spaces have agents in them which strive and solve problems. And
before we get too much further, we forget about the worms, the planariums. In case you're not aware of these things, they apparently don't die. They're eternal beings, like a photon or something. And there's a lot of really weird stuff in regards to these things. But that's the worm that they also used an electrical signal to prompt it to grow two heads. And then its progeny also grew two heads, but the genome was not changed. And that is their proof that the field, the morphogenetic field, I guess, is more, it's higher up on the hierarchy in the evolutionary process than DNA.
and succeed or fail, much like the obvious ones do in three-dimensional behavioral space. And so you can even think about evolution as pivoting some of the same tricks. And all of these tricks are around this notion of navigation, this sort of goal-directed navigation. Pivot some of the same tricks through different spaces. So early life in metabolic space, and then physiological space, and eventually the genes come along, and so now it's transcriptional space, and then morphology and multicellular organisms, and then brains and muscles develop, and you can do three-dimensional behavior, and eventually even linguistic navigation, right? So navigation, keeping the thread of a story or an argument through linguistic space. Okay, so we start to get an idea that things are not so simple as Adam in the Garden of Eden. It's not just about three-dimensional space. It's not just about a fixed natural kind. Many things are extremely plastic and exhibit competencies in different spaces. And so the bulk of today's talk, I want to talk about one particular example of that in computation and intelligence would be thinking about the origins of order in chemical systems. And I think that's because he saw a very profound symmetry between these two fields. The formation of the body and the formation of a mind are, I think, very tightly linked. In fact, the same problem, just in different spaces. And so we're going to talk about problem-solving living machines and how reprogrammable they are. So let's think about what anatomical space really looks like. Here is a cross-section of a human torso. You can see this amazing order, right? All the tissues, the organs, everything is in the right place, the right size, oriented correctly relative to each other. And it comes from a collection of embryonic blastomeres. This is how we start. Where is this pattern actually encoded, right? Where is this pattern determined? Now, people will reflexively say, well, it's the DNA. It's in the genome. But we can read genomes now, and we know what's in the genome. What's in the genome are descriptions of the tiniest level hardware that every cell gets to have, the protein sequences. There's nothing directly about any of this in the genome.
Okay. So if you guys were wondering what I was doing the entire time, I'm crocheting like a little witch hat. It's gonna be so adorable. I definitely need to post some of my crochet content. But okay. So we have learned about true nature, right? And our life cell and butterfly memory. The next thing we are going to learn about in the next video, so that's going to be part 2, is our machinery, how we work as human beings, how we work all together, and then pattern memory and glue. So, my laptop is about to die, but I hope you guys enjoyed this part 1 series of Michael Levin's theories of everything, of the universal mind. So, I will see you guys in the next video.